Here comes the, y'all don't really want it like that. Yeah, here comes the.
Unless you've been living under a rock, earlier this offseason, Russell Wilson didn't quite exactly demand a trade, but it almost seemed as if he wanted out of Seattle. Well, I'm here to reassure everybody, especially the national media, because it's really only the national media that's blowing this up. So don't let the media fool you. Russell Wilson is here to stay in Seattle for the long run. But before we get into that, if you're new to this channel, my name is Calvin-Domingo, aka SteezyBandz. Join the family, join the team. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for a brother. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Be sure to drop a like and also leave a comment for us if you enjoyed. Don't forget to find us on all social media platforms for more SteezyBandz content. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all that good stuff. Without further ado, you're tuning to SteezyBandz, and let's get to cooking. So, you might ask yourself, why might Russell Wilson be here in the long run? Well, I think it's all but a certainty that Russell Wilson is here to stay in Seattle, at least this year. And while there are no guarantees in the NFL, especially when it comes to star quarterbacks, and especially when it comes in an era of player empowerment, well, allow me to reassure some of you 12s out there, and especially some of those other people who still keep on insisting that Russell Wilson is out of Seattle. First of all, Russell Wilson wants the Seahawks to give him a little bit more say in personnel decisions, and they made major strides towards making that a reality for Russell Wilson when they hired Shane Waldron, the former passing game coordinator and tight ends coach of the LA Rams. Yes, I get it. He's yet to have any offensive coordinator experience in the NFL, but let's not get it twisted, y'all. He has a whole lot of support and a great coaching staff with the Seattle Seahawks. Not only that, he has a great front office, a great culture, and a group of great players. So I have no doubt in my mind that he'll succeed calling plays for the football team. Not only that, he was the right-hand man to one of the brightest offensive minds in all of football. If you ask former Rams coaches and former Rams players, Shane Waldron was an integral part of their game plans. He was an integral part of what they wanted to do on offense, and he was a very critical piece to some of the high-octane offenses that the Rams have displayed in the last couple of seasons. Now, bringing him over to Seattle, I honestly think that he's the biggest outside addition to the Seattle Seahawks this season. And that includes Gerald Everett, that includes Gabe Jackson, that includes the re-signing of Carlos Dunlap, that includes the San Francisco 49ers leading sack getter of Kerry Hyder Jr. last offseason. When you look at the Seattle Seahawks, they really don't have too many glaring holes on the roster. And when you look at some of the success that they've had in the last couple of seasons, they've gone from 10 wins to 11 wins to a division title and 12 wins last season. This team is still on an upward trajectory, and when you look at some of the issues that have plagued this team, you look at Russell Wilson and his propensity for taking sacks, because yes, I'm not going to absolve him any of that blame when it comes to the 50-plus sacks he continues to take on an annual basis. The offensive line was actually one of the better units that he's had in the last couple of seasons last year, as they were at about middle of the pack when all was said and done, and so Russell Wilson has to do his part and get rid of the football quickly. Here comes Shane Waldron, and he's going to help Russell Wilson do exactly that. Shane Waldron is going to be able to install an offense that's going to help Russell Wilson to get rid of the football quickly. It's going to help Russell Wilson find quicker reads. It's going to help Russell Wilson find screens and give the ball to the receivers on end arounds and jet sweeps. This is where DK Metcalf and his blazing speed comes in hand. We saw that time and again last season. Whenever DK Metcalf had the football in his hands, he was absolutely one of the fastest human beings in all of the planet Earth. That this team already has an elite offense without Shane Waldron. And you also look at the fact that Russell Wilson wanted Shane Waldron in Seattle. Well, it's a win-win. Not only is he going to improve the offense, well, it makes Russell Wilson happy because it's the guy that he wanted in town. I said it earlier and I'm going to say it again. Shane Waldron is going to be the most critical outside addition to the Seattle Seahawks roster this upcoming season. If you guys watch Fox Sports, then you know that Brandon Marshall always has a lot to say about Russell Wilson and what's going on in Seattle. Well, when this whole saga began, he was essentially saying that the Seahawks were going to have to choose between Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll. Now, his stance has changed. A couple months later, he's taken a complete 360. And yes, he only played one season in Seattle, and so it's not a very safe assumption to say that he has close relationships with some of those guys in the franchise, but he does have a little bit of credibility, and whatever he does say in regards to Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks definitely has more credibility than the next person. And with that being said, while this isn't what he said exactly verbatim, what he did say was that Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson have arguably hit the point in the relationship where, yes, they've been through a few rocky moments, but right now, the relationship as it stands right now is arguably the best that it's ever been throughout the entirety of the relationship. Both sides have pretty much come to the realization that they need each other to win, and Russell Wilson elsewhere just isn't going to get him what he wants. And at this stage in his career, Pete Carroll is simply getting too old for a rebuild. He's not going to want to stick around for a rebuild. He's closer to the end of his career than the beginning of it. And while Russell Wilson still has a lot more years left on his career, hopefully he does want to play till he's 45, as he's previously stated. And that's just not going to happen in Seattle unless they bring in the necessary reinforcements in regards to his offensive alignment, and unless they bring in an offensive coordinator that's going to help him get rid of the football a lot quicker. Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks have had a chance to scour the trade market to see what they could possibly get for Russell Wilson, and they just couldn't come to an agreement in terms of what they wanted in exchange for Russell Wilson. Because that was completely shut down, well, Pete Carroll finally realized that, okay, if I'm going to win, my best chance is with Russell Wilson at quarterback, and so we're going to start catering to Russell Wilson. That does not mean that the Seahawks are going to stop running the football. They're still going to run the football. Pete Carroll still meant it when he said they're going to run the football, but my interpretation of that was, while he wants to run the football more, I think he places more value on running the football more effectively. And Seattle, while they were pretty effective last year at running the football, while they didn't run it enough, there's still room for improvement in terms of running the football, hence the re-signing of Chris Carson, a top 10 running back in all the NFL, to a below market deal. And so when you take that in consideration, when you look at the fact that Brandon Marshall has a lot to say, or at least has credibility when reporting on the Seattle Seahawks, we got to take it at its face value. We got to take what he says and got to take it to the bank, really, because why else would a guy take a complete 360 on his stance a couple of weeks later? He has to know something that the rest of us don't know. That's another reason why Russell Wilson is here to stay in the long run. And I've been on the record saying this before, winning cures all. If that's truly the case, and Seattle really has a roster capable of contending for a Super Bowl now, why leave that? Russell Wilson idolizes guys like Kobe Bryant and Derek Jeter, who played for the Lakers and the Yankees respectively. And what do those two have in common? Well, they played for the same teams their entire careers, and they ended up winning towards the end of their careers. And I see a similar situation to Russell Wilson in Seattle. A month ago, we dropped a video comparing Kobe Bryant and his trade demand with the LA Lakers and how they were able to fix that, and we compare that to Russell Wilson and the entire saga with the Seattle Seahawks. Now, I get it, the NBA and the NFL are different sports, and it doesn't necessarily take one piece to create a Super Bowl contender in the NFL, but that one piece could very well be Shane Waldron and the rest of the offseason additions that the Seattle Seahawks have made. One more thing. Remember that list of trade destinations that Russell Wilson made that consisted of the Dallas Cowboys, the Las Vegas Raiders, the New Orleans Saints, and the Chicago Bears? Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that none of those teams are really in the running for Russell Wilson anymore. We also made a video about a month ago talking about why none of those teams really made sense for Russell Wilson. And fast forward today, none of those teams still make sense for Russell Wilson. And so my opinion deep down was that this is a dummy list. This is just a list to put out there for the media to kind of talk about. These aren't really teams that he'd really want to go to. Look at Dallas. They were able to re-sign Dak Prescott to a record-breaking 4-year, $160 million deal. And so Dallas is definitely out of the equation. The appeal in Vegas, they had an elite offensive line. Well, they've completely decimated the offensive line, and the Raiders have stood behind Derek Carr, and so the Raiders are no longer an option. Chicago Bears, they don't have the pieces to trade for Russell Wilson, and even if they were to give up their entire roster and their entire treasure trove of draft picks, then they won't be able to contend. And so the Chicago Bears, they're out of the picture, and they do seem satisfied with their new QB1 and Andy Dalton. And when you look at the New Orleans Saints, they have Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, and they still seem to be in a bad situation in regards to their cap. And so for them to come up with a package that would appeal to the Seattle Seahawks would just take too much. It would just be like the Chicago Bears. They'd have to give up all their picks and their entire roster of stars to even have a chance at acquiring Russell Wilson. Now, there could be a team in the near future that could potentially swing a trade for Russell Wilson. You look at the Philadelphia Eagles, for example, if they're not happy with Jalen Hurts. You look at the Washington football team. And so there are some teams out there, but I think that Russell Wilson, if he wants to win, it's going to have to be in Seattle. Last but not least, Carlos Dunlap is back in Seattle, and I'm sure everyone's heard about what he had to say about Russell Wilson in the conversation that they had. While I'm not going to put too much stock into that conversation, why would Carlos Dunlap come back to a team like the Seattle Seahawks while he enjoyed the culture, while he loved the city, while he loved everyone in the city and on the team? Why would he come back to the Seattle Seahawks in the twilight of his career, knowing that the quarterback of the football team isn't going to be there for the long run? He signed a 2-year deal, and his cap hit this year is an astonishing $2.9 million. There's no doubt in my mind that he had full assurance from Russell Wilson that he was at least guaranteed to stay in Seattle, not just beyond this year, but in the years coming. They both know that this team is Super Bowl ready at this point in the offseason, and there is still the draft to go. There is still plenty of offseason to go, but when you look at some of the signings that Seattle has made, when you look at the fact that Seattle almost never uses their proverbial credit card when it comes to creating cap space, that just means that they're catering to Russell Wilson more and more. Tyler Lockett, 4 years and $69 million. They're bringing in Gabe Jackson via trade from the Raiders. These are just moves that the Seahawks wouldn't have made in previous years. And what I mean by that is in regards to the contractual stipulations of some of those contracts. We look at some of these voidable years in some of these contracts. Yes, it helps the Seahawks in the short term in regards to cap relief, but down the line, this is going to hurt the Seahawks, and that's what I mean by using a credit card. When you use a credit card, you don't pay now, you pay later. And so what the Seahawks are doing with some of these contracts, Carlos Dunlap, Kerry Hyder Jr., Chris Carson, Gerald Everett, Gabe Jackson, there are dummy years on these contracts, but the Seahawks are going to take cap hits, dead money cap hits later on when these guys are quite possibly no longer on the team. When you look at the Seahawks, they're making moves that they usually haven't made. Pete Carroll has come to the realization that his only chance of really winning a Super Bowl in the twilight of his career is with Russell Wilson. And so when the Seahawks are making moves that they usually don't make, it has to mean one thing and one thing only. They love Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson is here to stay. Now, I can't guarantee Russell Wilson staying beyond the final 3 years on his deal, but I can almost guarantee that he will be in Seattle throughout the entirety of his 3-year deal with the Seattle Seahawks. With all that being said, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Is Russell Wilson still here to stay in Seattle for the long run? Have the moves that they made this offseason, are they enough to appease to Russell Wilson? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Well, that concludes this video. You don't have to stop watching our content here. There's plenty more content on our channel homepage, as well as the rest of our social media platforms at Steezy Smith. Hope you guys enjoyed. Nothing but love, and Steezy out.